Okay. Hi, I'm back. It's been about a month since I recorded the little intro thing, like with all of my disclaimers about after. I can hold it up now, after. So I have finished reading this book and I have some notes on it. Super quick, Katie, who is like my best friend and also the incredibly talented editor who helps me out with all of this.
Yep.
And her dog Annie, not Annie anymore, just Katie, will be here. She's hanging out. If you hear extra noises, that's what that is.
Might make a reference to the movie because I watched the movie.
Katie watched the movie. I have not. So she can offer insight into that. She hasn't read the book, but she's watched the movie, and I haven't watched the movie, but I've read the book. So 2 different insights there on this story and these characters. Super quick for those of you who haven't read the book. The main characters are Hardin and Tessa. Hardin is the name given to Harry Styles in the translation. Tessa is Tessa. She's a college student. She likes to read. That's pretty much her entire character. Other names you might hear, Noah is Tessa's high school boyfriend that she has going into college. And I don't think that was a changed name. I think he's just a character, an original character.
Just Noah.
He's just Noah. And then Zed is Zane. Landon is Liam. What are the other 2?
There's Nate, who's Niall.
Yep.
And then Louis is Logan.
Well, I don't even know if I remember Logan in the book. I mean, I'm sure he was there. Niall's character is another super minor character. I've been informed that they don't show up in the movie.
Yeah, only Zed, Landon, and Hardin show up in the movie.
Which makes sense because the other characters don't play a real, very important role in the book. Couple disclaimers. Again, I am not reviewing this for quality of writing. There are a lot of reviews out there for this book and how it's written. I don't really care. Book can be written well and be enjoyable. Book can be written poorly and be enjoyable. So I'm not going to be making comments on that. If that's what you're looking for, find a different video. It's really hot in here. I'm also drinking a hot coffee, so I'm not going to take this off. There was a second point to make. Oh, I am speaking of this not as a professional in any of this by any means, just sort of from personal experience, from things that I've learned. I'm a really stubborn person and I've learned a lot of lessons. So I'm here to impart that wisdom to you so you don't have to learn those lessons too. Finally, don't take this as don't read the book or do read the book. This is just my outlook, my insight. I'm sort of just here to look at the relationship and talk about its pros and cons. So whether or not you buy this book after watching this video is up to you. I'm not going to make any decisions for you. So let's jump in. I have marked all of the tabs. I want to say every color. I ran out of sticky notes at a certain point, so some of the colors mean the same thing. But there are categories for what I've marked. First and foremost, this book, I just looked it up, it is marketed as young adult. There are 17 instances of pretty graphic sex scenes in it. So I definitely wouldn't recommend this for young adults. If that's what you're looking for, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you. I just wouldn't market this for young adults. I don't think it's appropriate for that age group. As far as other sorts of markers, I have marked red flags, things that are very obviously upsetting that happen in their relationship. Yellow flags, things that in a vacuum would probably not be a huge deal, but are sort of indicative of a deeper issue. And I have little blue markers for circumstances where Tessa is being groomed. Not always by Hardin. Sometimes her family has groomed her in the past. So those are like my 3 main classifications. I'm gonna start with my yellow flags because there are the most of those. I have notes, so if you see me looking down, I'm reading. So first and foremost, I want to indicate that from my perspective, this is a pretty abusive relationship. Not physically necessarily, but like definitely emotionally, verbally, it's pretty rough. There's a lot of people who defend it because he changes, and that's true, he gets better, but he also isn't great. I'm gonna start actually about halfway through the book. If you're following along, page 236, I have in my notes, he's calling her and his family boring, which sounds really mild, but so he has, up until this point, been kind of awful to her. Just rude, very critical. She's described as dressing very prudish, very modestly, long skirts, loose shirts, no makeup, which is fine. If you dress like that, good on you if that's what you're comfortable and happy in. He critiques her about it a lot, which I take issue with, but I guess that's not what I'm discussing right now. He has at this point taken her on a date, maybe 2. They have been intimate a couple of times, and she has just met his parents for the first time. They assume that they're dating. Hardin doesn't really do anything to dispel that, and despite her efforts to sort of convince them otherwise, he actually like sort of works against that. For context, he says he doesn't date. So there's like sort of a strange dynamic there of the will they, won't they, I suppose, is what the author is going for here. When he gets upset, he tends to throw things and then storm out. Very childish, very immature. Don't love it. That's a really bad way of coping with things, especially in the context of like other people being around. So he abandons her with his family to storm out of the house. So she follows him because she doesn't know these people. That's super fair. And when he tells her to go back inside, she tells him, I don't want to go back. And his response is, you fit in perfectly with their prudish and boring personalities. It's pretty well known at this point that he doesn't get along with his family. So it's not super shocking that he would call them prudish and boring. What isn't great is the fact that he has been definitely leading her on up until this point. She still has a boyfriend that isn't him, and now he's like sort of just like insulting her because he's frustrated with his family. I take major issue with that because she didn't do anything. It's bad. That's a theme that goes throughout this book, is him criticizing her for being boring, which does really awful things to a person. Like if you convince a person that they're not worth being around, they'll be less likely to go out and make new friends because they're less likely to reach out to people, because why would they do that to somebody if they're boring? There are a lot of situations where he calls her out in front of people for things that he has no right to call her out about. His favorite thing seems to be embarrassing her in front of her boyfriend, pointing out that they've spent time together in front of her boyfriend, which she's cheating on him, so to some degree she definitely deserves that, but by the same token, he's kind of being an ass. I don't think I support either of them in a lot of these situations. Page 312. Let's visit that, because this is the point where I started getting a little bit spooked. I had a really hard time with this experience, reading this book. It called up a lot of memories. If you have this sort of experience, I'm, first of all, very sorry. Second of all, I don't think I would recommend this book, because it's very reminiscent of very real world issues. But page 312, he has just dropped her off after, I guess, like, the first time he's admitted to wanting to spend more time with her. He's implied that he will text her later and never does. But the paragraph that really bothered me was, I grabbed my purse and checked my phone one last time. Of course, Hardin hasn't texted or called me. I hate the way I feel dependent on him, especially when I obviously can't depend on him. So this is the point where I sort of realized that this is like a very, very bad thing. That she's already dependent on him after like a couple of dates and meeting his parents twice. That phrasing is really indicative of like a very deep issue. The idea of dependency is really common in emotional abuse, making you feel like you can't live without them, making you feel like without them you are less than whole, like you're not a real person unless they're around, unless you're in constant contact with them. And that's something that can carry into other relationships once you've been trained to feel it. I'm not going to talk about all of them because there's a lot here, like a lot. This next thing was something that Katie had brought up that she asked about that happened in the movie that's very prevalent in the book. There she is. So page 403, Hardin doesn't talk to Tessa in front of his friends except for to insult her. This is 400 pages in, there's 700 pages, 600 pages, almost 600 pages in this book. So this is like pretty well into the storyline. Even when they're like pretty consistently seeing each other, she's broken up with her boyfriend, she's like spending the night with Hardin pretty regularly, he won't admit to his friends that they're seeing each other. Which is like, that in itself is a red flag. If somebody isn't willing to introduce you to their friends or like admit to their friends that they're seeing you, if they're acting embarrassed about you, get out. That's not good. This is the first scene that he is even sort of affectionate with her, even sort of like anything but antagonistic towards her in front of her friends. And the scene is actually him when she has encountered him and his friends at a bar after being told that he will contact her and he hasn't. Well, he shows up at this place with all of his friends, implying that he just sort of decided there were better things to do than hang out with her. And my battery's dying. This is well into their relationship. They're not dating at this point, but they're seeing each other pretty consistently. She's broken up with her boyfriend for him twice by this point, and he still won't really acknowledge that he's seeing her to his friends, which feeds more into he's calling her boring, he's implying that he's too good for her, and he's sort of like training her to believe that bit by bit. He had promised to call her to plan something earlier in the day, and he never does. So she goes out to get herself a meal because she's a human being, and that's what you gotta do sometimes. And he shows up with all of his friends, which implies to her pretty heavily that he just decided there were better things to do than see her, which again feeds into his superiority thing. And she gets up and is ready to storm out because she just has every right to do that. And he says to her, "You're not gonna kiss me before you go," which is the first even remotely kind thing he's said to her in front of his friends. This causes a lot of confusion among them, specifically Molly, who is the girl he had been sleeping with prior to sort of starting to pursue Tessa. And when Molly questions it, it's Zed who actually explains it. Tessa leaves and Hardin follows her, and when she expresses why she's upset, she says, "You haven't texted me all day and you're here with Molly." It's a pretty well-known thing between them that she's pretty jealous of Molly, which is valid. He's not been particularly cognizant of how she's feeling about that, because he just assumes that he can get away with anything, from what I understand. Especially because he won't commit to her. They're not in an exclusive relationship, so he sees it as sort of a free pass to go sleep with this other girl as much as he wants. Well, when she expresses this to him on the street outside of this restaurant bar place, he gaslights her, which is something that he starts to do a lot after this point. Basically just saying, I wasn't just with Molly, so I don't know why you're being so dramatic. It's not like you're my girlfriend. That's an issue. Especially because up until this point, he's been too embarrassed of her to admit to his friends, including Molly, that they're seeing each other. And now he's making her feel like a child and making her feel like she's in the wrong for being jealous and being upset about being treated as sort of less than equal to him. Those are my yellow flags. There are a lot more. Those are the ones I really wanted to delve into because I feel like those sum up a lot of what it is. There's a lot more, but those are the ones that I really wanted to touch on, just for the sake of this not being a 6-hour-long video. So this is where it gets really dicey. Like, it was already a little bit upset. It was at a point with the yellow flags that I was concerned. Like, looking at it all listed out, I was like, wow, this is a little bit sketchy. I'm concerned. And then I started really looking at red flags, and yikes. The first thing that should have sort of tipped me off, actually, was in the prologue. Second page of this book. Like, right out the gate. She has written, she being Tessa, because this is first person. At times I am grateful, so utterly lost in the moment of passion that my judgment is clouded and all I can see is him. Other times, I think that the pain he has caused me, the deep sting of loss for who I had been, the chaos of those moments when I felt as if my world had been turned upside down and the answer isn't as clear as it once was. Referring to the question of, would she have done things differently if she had known how this was going to turn out? Right off the bat, that's pretty upsetting. That's concerning. She feels that she's been so, intrinsically changed by this man that she misses who she used to be. I mean, that could be like she's grown up, but the way that it's phrased is concerning. That's, if you're in a place where you feel like you're changing, you're kind of being forced to change, and you're not necessarily happy with that change, take a step back and reevaluate, because that's not how relationships are supposed to be. Took a break. The camera overheated. I ate dinner. The light's a little bit different because it's later. But back into it. Page 31. Hardin and Tessa have been talking literally not at all. Like, he has insulted her a handful of times so far. They've never interacted one-on-one. And she, during a party at a frat house, wanders upstairs because she's a little bit overwhelmed and finds her way into an unlocked room. And it happens to have a copy of a book in it that she is a fan of. I want to say I'll check. It's a classical novel, something that cliche book nerd would appreciate. Wuthering Heights. So she's standing in this room reading this book, and Hardin comes in angry because it's his room, naturally. And rather than express his distaste for her being there, he corners her and yells at her. It's a pretty violent scene. He doesn't harm her or hit her, but he corners her and yells at her, which is an imposing thing. That's a tactic to assert dominance, I guess. So that was a major red flag, sort of out of the gate, for their relationship. This is how they're starting off. I guess there's only up to go, like, short of him, like, starting to physically abuse her. But then I also wanted to point out on page 34 that Tessa is not blameless. She's kind of also a piece of work. The sentence that she says is, "The only thing I can picture him reading is the back of a beer bottle." Tessa's pretty judgy at this point. He does, like, accuse her of that a lot throughout the book, and at least at first it's pretty valid. She's pretty judgmental and, like, critical because he's edgy and has facial piercings, which does Harry Styles have facial piercings?
No.
I didn't think he did. Okay. We have, like, the Hardin being Harry Styles is, like, it's such a loose comparison. Like, these two characters are not even remotely the same. I just want to point out, like, I don't know much about Harry Styles. Obviously, I didn't know his face was pierced. But I'm pretty sure Hardin is nothing like him. So, side note. Jumping forward a little bit, page 183. Hardin is upset because Tessa's around. That's usually about all it takes. He basically tells his friends to stop bringing her around, and she is not really privy to this conversation. She doesn't really take part in it much. But the parting words which Hardin leaves her, where she's there, she hears it. "If I ever see her again in this house, I'll ruin her." I feel like I don't have to explain why that's bad. So I'm just going to leave that there for a second. Moving on. Okay. Page 333. At this point, they have been together for a little bit. They've slept together a number of times. And she has spent the night with him. They had a fight the day before because they literally always have had a fight at some point during the day. And she wakes up. He asks her if they can talk about it. And she says, "No, I have to go to class." And he says, "Oh, well, class has already started. I turned off your alarm." Of course, his reasoning is, "You were up late. I wanted you to get enough sleep. I knew that you were gonna be tired if you went to class." But she had taken care to set an alarm to go to class. He had no right to do that. That's something that I actually recently read about. It's called academic abuse, where basically somebody will keep their significant other from going to class, will keep them from doing their homework so that their grades suffer, so that it's just another method of taking control away from them, making those decisions for them, not allowing them to be successful. And so, like, it's an isolated incident. He doesn't, like, force her at any other times to, like, skip class or to not do homework. In fact, she's pretty, like, adamant about doing her work. She's a good student because that's most of her character. But that's still worth noting that that happens in this book, and that's super not okay. A little bit later, they're returning to his parents' house, and he is rude to his father, and she berates him. She says, "Don't talk to your father like that." Probably not like that, but, you know. And rather than, like, be sort of salty about it like a human being, he grabs her and drags her up to his room and slams her against the wall and pins her wrists to the wall and, like, leans in very close and, like, tells her never to do that ever again, like, very close to her face while, like, physically restraining her. Worth noting, he does release her when she asks him to, but that's not a thing he usually does. There are multiple cases of him grabbing her when she tries to walk away from him and refusing to let go when she asks him to. That's as physically abusive as this relationship gets, fortunately, but that's still pretty not okay. Like, physically restraining somebody, regardless of the reasoning, is bad news bears. Like, if you have a significant other who, like, when they're upset, slams you against a wall, like, I don't care if you're not getting bruised. I don't care if you've never hit your head and it's never left a mark and it's never really hurt. That's, like, a gateway into a lot more. And the response to literally anything should never, ever, ever be physical violence. Just like, that's a blanket statement that I feel very comfortable making. Not too long after that, Hardin confesses his love to her for the second time. The first time he did it to win an argument. Also take issue with that, but I only have so much time. He's confessed his love to her. She's confessed her love to him. They're in love. Yahoo. But even then, she's like weeping. Like, she's very upset. And when he's like presses her to know why, she says that he's hurt her a lot. And he says, I won't hurt you anymore. I won't hurt you again. And she literally begs him not to at this point. Literally begs him not to hurt her anymore. Like, this is supposed to be like a tender, like, coming together moment where, like, all is well. They have ended up together. Yay. We can all be happy as readers. And even then, it's, like, tainted by this, like, knowledge that he's probably gonna continue to do bad things. And she's gonna get hurt. And she's willing to overlook that. Which, in some scenarios, might be seen as very romantic and very sweet, and is never a good thing. I don't care how romantic and sweet it is if you're solely responsible for carrying the brunt of your significant other's anger, annoyance, all of that. It's a bad thing. Don't do that. You're not meant to fix people. I don't care how cute or tattooed or pierced they are. It's not your job to make sure that they become a better person. That's their job. A scene that I really want to delve into. Page 377. They have just moved in together. Spoiler alert. I'm gonna spoil this book a lot. I already have. 377. They move in together. And she wakes up next to him and starts like tracing her hand along his face. This is something that happens in a lot of romance novels. I'm sure it's a lovely, intimate thing. And he wakes up because he's being touched about the face. And her first instinct is to apologize. And the dialogue tag that is given to this is, I don't know what to say. I don't know what type of mood he will be in after we fall asleep in each other's arms. She has, at this point, it's almost 400 pages into this book of 600. At this point, has been trained into expecting some sort of anger or violence. That's a major red flag in any relationship. I don't care if it's romantic. I don't care if it's familial. I don't care if it's friendship. If your first instinct when somebody catches you doing something that isn't even incorrect, like what she's doing isn't wrong, it's like a very sweet, romantic, intimate gesture that isn't like she's waking him up with something sexual. It's a very sweet, small gesture. And her first instinct is still to apologize, which tells me that she is afraid of him to some degree. And you shouldn't be afraid of your significant other. Another generalization that I am very comfortable making. You should not be afraid of the person you're with. You shouldn't be afraid of your friends. You shouldn't be afraid of your family. There can be respect there without there being fear. Those two things are two very different things that are too often linked together, especially in familial situations, but that's an issue for another video. Another thing, that my last red flag that I really, really want to discuss is page 398. They've spent the day together and he has started getting quiet and sullen. She is at this point very cognizant of this because she has been trained to pick up on his moods, because she has been trained to fear him when he's in a bad mood. That is a major symptom of trauma-related issues. That's something I still, when people around me aren't in great moods, even if they're just like quieter than usual, I'm very aware of it, and I tend to get fidgety and nervous because I have been trained to fear that. So that's really common in abuse victims, is like being very cognizant and fearful of shifts in mood, even if it's like not necessarily correct. Like, even if I'm misinterpreting why you're quiet, I'm going to have that visceral response to that. Well, so he's gotten quiet and he's gotten sullen, and he tells her that he has other things to do that day. It turns out to be like work, I'm pretty sure. And she calls him out on it. She's concerned. She's clearly disappointed. And his response is, "You're upset because I have things to do today." And it's phrased in such a way that it says that she realizes how ridiculous and obsessive she sounds, which is pretty rich coming from him. He, throughout this book, on many, many, many occasions, pulls her away from other obligations, sort of forbids her from like seeing other people, not even in a romantic way, just like hanging out with friends. So this is like a situation where this is gaslighting, where he is making her feel foolish for having concerns, telling her that her concerns aren't valid because why would she have a right to be concerned about where he is? That's ridiculous. And so then of course she's like wondering why she's upset. She feels stupid. She feels foolish. All very common responses to being the victim of gaslighting. And she says, her response is, "I just don't want you to be distant from me," which is a really valid thing to say to somebody, especially somebody you're in a romantic relationship with. You want to know what's going on in their head. You want to be part of it. You want to be on the same wavelength. And his response isn't, "I'll do better. I'm sorry that I've done this. I'm sorry that I'm not able to communicate literally ever," because he's not. It's, "I'm sorry I'm making you feel that way," which sounds like an apology and isn't. It's the idea of, "I'm sorry that you perceive that I've done wrong," not "I have done wrong and will remedy that or acknowledge that." And that's a very, very common tactic of emotional manipulators and abusers, is apologizing for something that's tangentially related to the thing that you actually need the apology for. Things like, "I'm sorry you think that I hurt you. I'm sorry that you are feeling bad right now. I'm sorry that..." It's like it dodges around the actual issue, and so therefore he never takes any blame or responsibility for anything. He says, "I'm sorry that you are having issues, therefore making it your fault." And he's just the saint that's willing to offer an apology for that, you know? So that's super problematic. And that's something that people don't catch on to very often, especially in emotional abuse, because that's the thing about emotional abuse, is it's a lot quieter than physical abuse. You don't come away with bruises. You don't come away with blood. It's all very internal, and so it's harder to pinpoint. And so that's like something to really look for. And if that's something that happens in your relationship a lot, it's a form of gaslighting, and you should definitely, if you're comfortable, talk to your partner about that, because that's not cool. And there's a possibility that they don't realize it's happening. That's something that should be nipped in the bud really, really early on. Otherwise that can become a habit that nobody wants. But I am going to wrap it up. So this was a lot. There's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot more to unpack that I'm just not going to get to, because that would be a really long video and I'm not going to do that. Also, I'm like already losing my voice because I've just been talking a lot. So like the final thing that I wanted to point out in this book, the thing that really drove the point home for me. Page 458, so like very close to the end. This is after he's made her financially dependent on him. They've moved in together and he's paying for the apartment. She can't leave him without some very serious repercussions. He says to her, "You're the only constant in my life. You know that, don't you? I don't know what I'd do if you left me." Which is a sweet and romantic thing to say if you've just spent an entire novel emotionally abusing and manipulating a person. It saddles her with so much responsibility. He's putting his well-being, his happiness, all of that just like entirely on her. If she walked away, his life would be over. You can't walk away after that. Like you can and you should, but it's a way of keeping her there, a way of like making her feel like she can't leave. All in all, based on what I've just told you, based on what I read, this is a very bad relationship. This should not be the basis for what you look for in romance. And if your relationship looks like this, seek help. It may be like kind of cute and endearing at first when they're possessive and when they're like jealous, but it very quickly becomes isolating and overwhelming and you feel very, very trapped. If you are in a situation where you feel trapped in a relationship, I'm going to put some help lines down below. Please seek help. It's really hard to get out of these relationships, but it's very worth it. There is a life outside of that. I promise. I know. I've been there. And again, this isn't a reflection on Anna Todd. This isn't a reflection on the people who enjoy this book. If you enjoy this book for the sake of reading a romance novel, that's fine. You do you. Like, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. Just, I think it's very, very important, especially in a book marketed towards young girls who don't know what healthy romance looks like yet, to acknowledge that this is not it. This is a really harmful image to present to anybody, especially really young, developing people. That is my 2 cents on the matter. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything, let me know down in the comments and I will do my best to respond. And also, if you enjoyed this, please like it. And if you feel that this is a message that other people should hear, feel free to share it with the masses. I encourage that. Feel free to subscribe. I don't know when I'll post anything again or what it would be, but if you have suggestions for that, also let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much.